Hello everyone, it's Kingdom Silver here. I'm sure you've heard that stat that seems to come out every now and again that's like, hey, if everybody in the world just owned a couple of ounces of silver, this would completely destroy the current supply of silver and the market would just skyrocket. And yet, even though we hear that, we're still not completely seeing the full adoption of precious metals that we want to see. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing why people just don't like purchasing precious metals. Without further ado, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the video. Thank you so much for checking out the channel. Let's dive right in. Now, this list that I'm going to give you 3 different reasons that I've come up with. This isn't an exhaustive list, and in the comments, I'd love to hear, hey, what's your theory? Why do you think that people just aren't interested in investing in precious metals like we would all love to see? I think there's a lot of different reasons, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But the first reason is that I don't think people understand what real money is, what real wealth is. We've lived in a society for so long that's been dominated by paper currency, fiat, the promise of a government that says, hey, this is worth this much. And we've seen the consequences, right? We've seen rising inflation. We've seen crazy instability in our world, in our financial systems. But you know what? It wasn't that long ago, right, that we actually had real money, right? The U.S. Used to be, our currency used to be backed by physical gold and silver, and it really wasn't that long ago, right? Having said that, 1896 here, right? That's been a hot second. But, in the grand scheme of the world as a whole, been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? This wasn't that long ago. Or take a more recent example with, these 90% quarters, right? These were, came out in our stopped production in 1964. Again, in the grand scheme of humanity, that wasn't long ago. I think as humans, the problem is often we lose track of history. We don't understand where we've come from or the lessons of history, and we make some of the same mistakes. And if you look at it over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, what happens? Paper currency crashes, and eventually people go back to what is really a storage of value, and that is physical silver, physical gold. Another reason that I think people choose to not stack or to purchase precious metals is simply storage. They're like, hey, I don't want to have a bunch of physical gold and silver at my house. And in some cases that might be legitimate, right? If you live in a pretty dangerous area, you may say, hey, I don't want to own a lot of physical silver and gold. I get that. But having said that, there are a lot of avenues that you can do, a lot of avenues that you can take to own precious metals that are not owning it physically. There is gold and silver ETFs. Again, I have a video that's coming out on this about gold and silver ETFs. So please watch that first before just making a blind investment. But those are possible. Also, there's places like Kinesis that have tokens and coins, kind of like in a crypto, that are gold and silver backed, that you can then trade and purchase and also do online purchases through. No affiliation with Kinesis personally, but I've used it for a couple of years and have been really intrigued by it and feel it's really useful. So there are other alternatives. And I think, again, even if it is a storage issue, hey, for most of us, if you don't have the space to own gold or silver in your house, then I'm just going to be real blatant. You need to make space for gold and silver in your house. If your house is so crammed full, and trust me, I understand this, owning a 1960s-ish home, right, where there wasn't the large storage closets and places of the newer homes. I have room for my gold and silver. I think you can figure it out. The last thing that I think can really impact why people just don't invest in silver or gold is passivity. And this is the one I think that hurts me the most and this honestly used to be me. I think it's easy to go through life and just kind of hoe and hum and let other people, do the work for you and not take an active interest in your investments and preparing yourself and preparing your family for the future. And often that's where people just say, oh, I'm going to invest it in a bank, or I'm going to go into all these other investments. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And there are different people that have different aptitudes. So if you really are not great at managing your money or really struggle in making the right investments, then hey, I think you should talk to a personal financial advisor, somebody that knows what they're doing. But I think often it's just, oh, I'll get to that later, or I won't do this, or I won't do that. Well, there's so many examples out there, and you can look at the time value of money. There's no reason for me to go into it in depth here that talks about, hey, you need to own or get into investing the earlier the better, because then you can compound your money, you can compound your wealth, and it really makes a big difference. There's plenty of things out there that talk about investing in your 20s versus your 30s and how much more earning capacity you have in those situations. So if I could implore you, if you're just like, hey, I haven't got around to it, that's too much work, please do the research. It's really not as hard as you think. So with that, we're going to end the video today. In the comments, again, I'd love to hear, why do you think that people aren't getting into precious metals? Why do you think they're not investing in gold and silver? In particular, as we have silver on the screen today, I would love to hear your thoughts. Without further ado, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please, I would appreciate a like or a comment. Would love to interact with you and talk to you about the video. Also, if you're really enjoying the content, please, I'd really appreciate a subscribe. It helps me out, but not only that, much more importantly, it gets the word out about gold and silver. With that, be blessed, be a blessing to others. We'll see you later.